So hi everybody, my name is Max Soyref. I come from Australia. I work for KPMG. I've been working with blockchain and technology for the last 5 years, pretty much since the initial kind of blockchain ecosystem started to come up in the industry. And today I'm going to share some of the work we've been doing in Australia around the construction space with government, really hopefully showcasing some of those elements of applied use cases for blockchain and digital technologies. So many of you, I think at least from the keynote panel, have traveled here from the UK, and you may recognize this picture. But for those of you who may not know, this is the Grenfell Tower, one of the biggest construction disasters we have seen in recent history that caused significant loss of life and led to a really important set of insights looking at, how do we do modern construction? How do we do modern construction in a way that's not just sustainable, but of high quality? And this is extremely important today because construction is one of the most significant industries we have. I think some of the statistics we saw in the earlier sessions, Hong Kong is going to continue to grow significantly. I think globally we are about to bring on as much building and infrastructure online as we've seen to date between now and 2050. So we're going to continue to build more, and it's a vital and critical sector, and it will continue to grow and grow significantly. So quality, however, represents a very important challenge everywhere, and I'm coming obviously at this from an Australian perspective, but especially if we look at the whole city here around us. When you build high-rise, you build at pace, you build at high volume, the questions come up: how can we continue to create buildings that are safe and sustainable, but at the same time remaining of high quality? This is some of the Australian statistics we have here. It's a research has done in the state of New South Wales, so about 1/6 of Australian population. And looking at medium to high rise, 36% of buildings had major defects that cost quite a bit of money to remediate. And quite a bit of time. So for the developers, there is an element of rework, an element of costs, but more importantly for owners, there is a significant impact. And if we're talking about residential construction, for many, this is the most significant purchase we will make in our life if we're lucky to own property. So imagine acquiring a place and then having to deal with defects. So quality, I think, is incredibly important and requires some different thinking to address today. Further to this, and this is really echoing where Professor Cheng started today this morning, construction industry, despite its growth, is undergoing quite a bit of change. There's a very fast pace of change where what we are seeing today, we're no longer building locally, we're building globally. We're looking at global construction product safety. We're looking at local jurisdictional requirements. We're looking at complex supply chains and complex geopolitical issues. We're also, our other keynote today talked about modular integrated constructions. So we're building differently. There is a lot of innovation, and pretty much everywhere you look, the answer to speed, the answer to quality, the answer to sustainability is offsite manufacturing, something to do with modular, something to do with DFMA or design from manufacturing and assembly. We are seeing that change quite a bit. And again, how can we retain quality? How can we retain quality once growth happens? And at least in Australia, and I think from some of the statistics I saw today, productivity is an incredible challenge in the space. So how can we build more while retaining the same resources? How can we control for costs in the changing world? And I think every company in the construction space is contemplating this, but also at the macro level, a lot of the economies are saying, well, how can we build better? How can we do this in a smarter way, in a more productive way? And I know at least some of the discussions we've had yesterday, digital or digitalization is often the answer. And finally, we are no longer thinking in the finance space where I originally come from. We are no longer thinking about a whole asset class. We're not just looking at commercial, residential, or industrial. We are starting to look at specific assets, looking at risk item by item and trying to understand how can we manage it better, whether as owners, whether as operators, or other areas. So we have a lot of change, a lot of drama happening in the industry, and probably to finish kind of the last introductory point, we're also dealing with the industry that is quite unique, I find, in a lot of sectors that we see. It's an industry that is made up of a very complex ecosystem of stakeholders. So if you're trying to achieve any meaningful change, and if you're trying to achieve any drive forward, you need to somehow align all the stakeholders, all this fragmented ecosystem, from owners, from financiers, from the regulators, to the actual people on site and people executing the word from trades. So how might we do that? What do we need to make that happen? And I think that is the part that for me is a critical element of any conversation about use of technology, is incentives, right? When we're talking about getting to the ground level, getting to the real world, ultimately we operate in a lot of commercially incentivized environment, or it might be regulatory incentivized environments, but ultimately every one of these complex stakeholders has something that drives them, has some outcomes that they're attempting to achieve, and we need to try and align the incentives in these complex ecosystems to try and create the momentum in the same direction, whether it is quality like I'm talking about today, it could be something like sustainability that is also a very topical area. And the flip side of those incentives, to create true and transparent incentives, I think we need very good and transparent data sets. And I think this is why we often talk about common data environments and BEAM as one of those recipes for alignment and coordination. And then we bring in things like blockchain when we're talking about transparency and aligning some of those incentives. In Australia, we also started to look at incentivization, not by looking at, as I said, the whole asset class, but starting to look what can we do on a project by project level, because again, construction industry, and I think as Yuri mentioned earlier, is quite unique, where you bring in the team for a specific project, you deliver almost like a custom product, and then you move on. And so how can you create those temporary incentives in an effective way, in a way that aligns everything? So this is, a lot of questions, but what is the answer? So in Australia, we've recently worked with the state government, the state regulator in construction safety, to try and address some of these questions by creating what we call a building trustworthy indicator. And fundamentally, it's a commercial tool, it's a market tool that the regulator has incentivized organizations to use, that collects 3 pieces of information about any construction project. First, we look at who was involved in construction. So we call it trusted participants, but if you think about developers, designers, head contractors, and trade contractors, who is involved, they're often the predictor of trustworthiness, they're a predictor of quality. We look at their financial history, we looked at their conduct. In Australian market, we have a number of products that, similar to a credit rating, can provide a rating for a player in a particular industry, but simply we answer the question, who was involved, and we know that about the project. The second part is obviously, what do you build the building out of? Material supply chains are critical for quality construction, and I think that's a very popular use case. And again, Yuri, thank you for a really nice setup before. One of the great use cases for blockchain is supply chain transparency. So track and trace, if we're talking cradle to gate, we've done a lot of work in paddock to plate agricultural sectors, but it's knowing where things come from, knowing their characteristics, knowing their quality credentials, and making sure that the right product was used in the right, as planned, in the right place. And finally, how do you combine those two things? The who and the what is effectively the how. And that is a lot of data that you would already be collecting in the document control systems, but less from a perspective of how do we coordinate the actual execution of the project, but how do we understand if the project was created in a manner that helps us ensure quality, helps us ensure trustworthiness in the long run. So we collect a lot of things like design artifacts, as-built artifacts, quality and inspection and test plans. We link them to a risk-based model of the building. So we break down the whole building and looking at failure mode analysis and how different parts of the whole impact each other, and try to calculate a score that can then be provided to that ecosystem of stakeholders. So fundamentally, the beauty of a score like this is you can go as shallow or as deep as you want. So if I'm a consumer and I'm buying an apartment, I don't want to learn about risk relationships. I probably don't even know all the parties that are involved in creating a building. What I want to know is what I look at on my Uber app or on when I order food is how many stars does this thing have. So we create 3, 4, and 5 stars is trustworthy. Anything below that is unrated. rated, but really gives an easy signal to the consumers about the trustworthiness of the building based on who was involved, how the building was built, and what materials were used. Underneath that, however, we provide the data to the regulator, we provide the data to the financiers, we provide the data to insurers to be able to run their own models based on this data at the level of depth that they may require. And fundamentally, what that leads to is a variety of incentives for the whole ecosystem, but the alignment where everybody wants to participate, both to contribute the data and to consume the data. So we've got about 10 different developers with about 15 projects already on the platform, with more and more coming online in New South Wales. And we're currently having conversations about having this product exist in the UK as well, from a perspective of golden thread relationships and storing the building DNA there. But the idea is that it does create opportunities for a financier. I can tailor my risk, whether I'm insuring or I'm financing, to a specific asset. I no longer need to pull averages. I can look at a specific item. For a developer, I can differentiate my product in the market. At least in Australia, a lot of developers are driven by pre-sales that happen before they actually start construction to manage their capital flows. That helps them promote the quality of their construction based on previous projects or based on the designs as an indicative idea of what their score will be. And for consumers, it gives them a simple trust indicator. Finally, for the regulator who drove this creation of this particular product, really this helps them switch from being reactive and saying things went wrong, I need to intervene, to being proactive and data-driven. All the regulators around the world have limited resources. Their ability to intervene, ability to enforce is limited by how many inspectors they can send on site and so on and so forth. Here, they can look at the data, they can look at the patterns and say, hey, this building is being really transparent. Maybe I don't need to look at it as closely. Whereas, why are these people not uploading any information into the system? How can we explore and investigate? So I think the fundamental point of linking the incentives and data transparency is where we see a lot of opportunities to creating meaningful change. And I think blockchain is one of those technologies that really has the potential to help enable that going into the future. I think we've had a number of conversations of, is blockchain really required? Is it at the core of a variety of applications? And can you achieve some of this innovation maybe without blockchain, with different technologies? And every time I have similar conversations with clients, I'd like to say, bring back the idea, why are you thinking about blockchain? What is it good for? And fundamentally, it's something that helps you achieve confidence in data, helps everyone involved in an ecosystem agree on a shared view of the world, and probably in the future, not as much yet today, although some of the research we've seen really creates that potential, see the opportunity for that automation and distribution of action through smart contracts. So the trusted data really helps us see, where did this data come from, who had access to it, who provided it, who has validated it. So we have that record that we can save in a immutable fashion, whether we're using blockchain or we're using something like append-only databases, to come back to and revisit again. I think the reconciled worldview is very well understood in this room, because as people talk about common data environments or BEAM, it's all about that coordination and synchronization, but we are now taking it beyond the boundaries of a single project and starting to say, how do we bring in the financiers, the insurers, the regulators into that ecosystem? How can we start to enable them to build their own application of this data? If I'm an insurer and I want to build my own model, how am I able to do that? And finally, and I think this is the holy grail of where this technology might lead us one day. Once we have that layer of trusted tokenized data with clear standardized approach to recording the world, and in this particular case, the building or the construction industry or the project, we start to be able to automate, and not in all cases, remove the human from this ecosystem. So I think automation in financing decisions, automation in maintenance decision, when we understand what's happening and we can order certain parts because the life cycle of an asset is nearing its end, all of those things require the data foundation. I know people are still looking for some of the opportunities in the space. I know this is still early days, but we can't get here without having that starting point. And that is what still, after all this 5 years, excites me about this, this technology. So I think with trusted data exchanges, with ability to decentralize access where required, not in all cases, but where necessary and where the use case allows it, we're are able to create those incentives and a transparent data view and prepare the industry for what I think is a fair few challenges, including scale, including ability to build in quality, and fundamentally what I know many people are going to talk about shortly is sustainability. So again, if you know about embodied carbon, if you know about sustainability, it's all very much about having accurate and transparent access to the data about the building, about the materials, and about what was involved. So I'll leave you with this thought. Blockchain in construction really helps us create that shared data layer, gain confidence, align the incentives, and in the future set us up to solve what are the next challenges in the ecosystem. Happy to chat more afterwards. My contact details are over there. Please add me on LinkedIn. Thank you very much.